Picture this. You're at a $1.2 million Napa Valley wedding when suddenly a woman in designer clothes wheels a double stroller down the aisle. The string quartet stops mid-note. 287 guests freeze in their seats. The bride's face goes white. The groom looks like he's seen a ghost. But this isn't just any wedding crasher. This is Gianna Rossi, former Victoria's Secret model, philanthropist, and the legal wife of the man getting married. What you're about to hear will shock you, because those weren't just any babies she was carrying. These twin boys, hooked up to heart monitors and fighting for their lives, held the key to exposing one of America's most elaborate deceptions. Their tiny heartbeats would become the soundtrack to a billionaire's downfall. Before we dive into this incredible story, hit that like button if you've ever felt betrayed by someone you loved, because what Gianna discovered about her husband's double life will leave you questioning how well you really know the people closest to you. But here's what nobody expected. The truth about those twins would expose a web of lies that brought down a $450 million empire. Hidden bank accounts, secret properties, forged documents, and a trail of financial fraud that would make your head spin. This wasn't just adultery. This was corporate-level deception that would change laws across 17 states. So buckle up, because you're about to witness the most satisfying takedown in modern history. This is the story of how two premature babies became the unlikely heroes who brought justice to a woman who refused to stay silent. To understand how we got to that devastating wedding crash, we need to go back to when Gianna Rossi was living what most people would call the American dream. At 38, she had everything society tells us we should want: beauty, wealth, status, and a husband who seemed to worship the ground she walked on. Gianna wasn't just another pretty face who married money. She'd earned her stripes walking runways for Victoria's Secret, gracing magazine covers, and building her own brand before she ever met Declan Whitaker. By the time she transitioned into philanthropy, focusing on childhood literacy programs, she was already financially independent. This wasn't a gold digger's story. This was a power couple combining forces. Declan Whitaker himself was the kind of success story that made business magazines salivate. While his tech contemporaries were chasing Silicon Valley unicorns, he saw opportunity in luxury experiential tourism. Starting with a single struggling bed and breakfast in Sonoma County that his father managed, Declan transformed it into Whitaker Resorts, a $450 million empire of exclusive properties across California, Aspen, and Miami. The Whitaker brand became synonymous with discretion and luxury. Celebrity weddings happened behind their ivy-covered walls. Political retreats were planned in their private conference rooms. When the wealthy wanted to escape public scrutiny, they escaped to Whitaker Properties. Their 2010 wedding at San Francisco's Palace of Fine Arts was the stuff of fairy tales. Vogue featured it in their Most Romantic Celebrations issue. The fireworks display over the bay cost more than most people's houses. Gianna wore a custom Vera Wang gown that took 8 months to create. 300 of their closest friends watched them exchange vows under a canopy of white roses that had been flown in from Ecuador. For the first few years, they were the couple everyone wanted to be. Gianna would accompany Declan to industry galas, where they'd pose for photographers looking absolutely smitten with each other. She'd joke about how he'd still leave her little love notes after being married for years. He'd publicly credit her with keeping him grounded when the business world tried to change him. Their Pacific Heights mansion became a showcase for their perfect life. Gianna hosted charity events that raised millions for underprivileged children. Declan would surprise her with trips to Paris just because she mentioned missing French pastries. They talked about starting a family, about expanding the resort empire internationally, about growing old together on their private vineyard. But here's what the cameras didn't capture during those glossy magazine shoots and red carpet appearances. Declan was becoming a ghost in his own marriage. It started subtly. Business trips that seemed to multiply. Investor meetings that stretched into long weekends. property scouting expeditions that kept him away for weeks at a time. When Gianna would ask to join him, there was always a reason why it wouldn't work. Boring meetings, remote locations, last-minute schedule changes. The man who used to call her 3 times a day when he was traveling suddenly became impossible to reach. When she'd try to surprise him at his hotels, the front desk would claim he wasn't registered. When she'd suggest they take a vacation together, he'd say he was too busy with the Miami expansion, or the Aspen renovation, or some new acquisition that demanded his complete attention. Their friends started noticing too. At dinner parties, Declan would spend the entire evening on his phone, claiming urgent resort business. He'd miss important events in Gianna's life, charity galas she'd been planning for months, family gatherings, even her birthday dinner one year, because of a crisis at the Cabo property. Drop a comment if you think money can buy happiness, because Gianna was about to learn that all the designer clothes and luxury vacations in the world can't protect you from betrayal. The woman who had everything was slowly becoming a stranger in her own marriage, watching the man she loved transform into someone she didn't recognize. She just didn't know yet that Declan wasn't changing. She was finally seeing who he really was. The truth came to light in the most ordinary way possible, through a forgotten iPad synced to their family cloud storage. Gianna was looking for a video of their daughter's ballet recital, something sweet and innocent to share with her sister. She opened the Photos app, expecting to find tutus and pirouettes. Instead, she found hundreds of images that made her stomach drop to the floor. Time-stamped photos showing Declan at their private Cabo San Lucas villa, a property she didn't even know existed. He wasn't alone. A stunning brunette was wrapped in his arms, wearing Gianna's favorite silk robe, the one she'd been looking for weeks. They were laughing on the beach, sharing champagne, looking at each other the way Declan used to look at her. But it was the timestamps that delivered the killing blow. March 15th, the weekend he'd claimed to be at an emergency investor meeting in Denver. April 2nd, when he'd said the Miami property needed his urgent attention. May 20th, her birthday weekend, when he'd apologized profusely for missing her dinner because of staffing issues at the resort. Each photo was a dagger. Each date was proof that her marriage had been a performance for years. Gianna's hands shook as she scrolled through image after image. The woman, who she later learned was Lila Torres, a former employee from the Miami resort, was wearing jewelry Gianna recognized. Earrings Declan had claimed were lost during shipping. A necklace he'd said was discontinued when Gianna had admired it in a magazine. But the photos were just the beginning. When Gianna started digging deeper into their financial records, she discovered that $2.8 million resort funds had been quietly transferred to maintain this secret property. Money that should have been reinvested in their legitimate businesses was instead funding Declan's double life. The villa itself was registered under a shell company that traced back to Declan's personal accounts, the same accounts that Gianna, as his wife and business partner, should have had visibility into. The same accounts that were supposedly funding their retirement, their daughter's college fund, their future together. That's when Gianna made a decision that would change everything. She called Miranda Kwan, a retired FBI forensic accountant who specialized in high-net-worth divorce cases. If Declan thought he could hide assets and play financial games, he was about to learn that Gianna hadn't spent 15 years married to a businessman without picking up a few tricks herself. Miranda's preliminary investigation revealed something that made the affair look like a minor betrayal. The Cabo property was just one piece of a larger puzzle. There were offshore accounts, questionable business expenses, and what appeared to be systematic financial fraud spanning multiple years. "Your husband isn't just cheating on you," Miranda told Gianna during their first meeting. "He's been stealing from you, from the business and potentially from investors. This goes way beyond adultery." Gianna felt like the ground had shifted beneath her feet. The man she'd trusted with her heart, her future, and her financial security had been systematically betraying her in every way possible. But Gianna was about to discover something even worse. Because while she was processing the magnitude of Declan's financial deception, Lila Torres was about to deliver news that would turn this personal betrayal into a life-and-death situation. Just as Gianna was beginning to process the scope of Declan's financial deception, Lila Torres delivered news that would change everything forever. She was pregnant with twins, and Declan was the father. This wasn't just any pregnancy. At 34 weeks, Lila was hospitalized with severe complications. The twins were in distress, their heartbeats irregular, their growth stunted. Doctors at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center warned that both babies faced life-threatening challenges if born prematurely. But here's where Declan's true character revealed itself in the most heartbreaking way possible. Security footage from the hospital shows him arriving at Cedars-Sinai on the day the twins were born. Instead of rushing to the neonatal intensive care unit where his sons were fighting for their lives, hooked up to ventilators and heart monitors, Declan walked straight past the NICU doors. His destination? Lila's private recovery suite, where he directed his assistant to arrange a $15,000 floral arrangement. 2 floors below, his premature sons, weighing barely 3 pounds each, struggled with every breath, while medical teams worked around the clock to keep them alive. One twin had complications with his lungs. The other showed signs of a rare genetic condition that required immediate specialist intervention. The babies needed their father's medical history. They needed his health insurance. They needed him to be present, to care, to fight for their survival the way any parent should. Instead, Declan was focused on damage control and keeping his double life from falling apart. When Gianna learned about the twins through Miranda's investigation, something fundamental shifted inside her. This was no longer about her broken marriage or stolen money. This was about 2 innocent babies whose father was willing to let them suffer rather than acknowledge their existence. The medical records that Miranda obtained through legal channels painted a devastating picture. Both twins required expensive, specialized care. One needed surgery for a heart defect. The other faced months of respiratory therapy. The total medical costs would easily reach hundreds of thousands of dollars. Money that Declan could afford, but was refusing to provide. These babies could die, Gianna told Miranda during one of their strategy sessions, not because medicine can't save them, but because their father is too selfish to admit they exist. That's when Gianna made a decision that would define the rest of her life. She couldn't save her marriage, and she couldn't undo Declan's betrayal, but she could fight for those twins. She could make sure they got the medical care they deserved. She could force their father to take responsibility for the lives he'd helped create. The twins spent their first 2 months in the NICU. Gianna found herself visiting them regularly, not because she had any legal obligation, but because no child should face such a fight alone. She watched these tiny warriors prove that strength isn't measured in pounds or size, but in the determination to keep breathing when everything seems hopeless. While Gianna was processing this betrayal, Declan was planning something unthinkable. He was moving forward with his wedding to Lila Torres, scheduled for September at a luxury Napa Valley venue. A celebration of their love while their twin sons remained in medical limbo, still requiring round-the-clock care. That's when Gianna realized that sometimes justice requires taking matters into your own hands. Miranda Kwan had spent 23 years with the FBI, specializing in financial crimes and asset recovery. She'd taken down money launderers, corporate fraudsters, and high-profile tax evaders. But when GNA walked into her office with evidence of Declan's deception, Miranda knew this case was different. Most people want revenge, Miranda told Gianna during their strategy session. You want justice. There's a difference, and that difference is going to win this case. Together they built an airtight legal strategy. Miranda's team spent weeks cataloging every financial discrepancy, every hidden asset, every questionable transaction. They traced the Cabot property purchase, documented the diverted funds, and established a clear pattern of financial fraud that violated both California's community property laws, and federal regulations. But Gianna wanted more than just a courtroom victory. She wanted Declan to face the consequences publicly, in front of the people who mattered most to him. When they learned that Declan and Lila had scheduled their wedding for September 14th at a luxury Napa Valley venue, Gianna saw her opportunity. The guest list read like a who's who of California's business elite. Investors, politicians, industry leaders. The same people who'd praised Declan's business acumen would witness his complete moral bankruptcy. The timing had to be perfect. Miranda's legal team would file papers freezing Declan's assets on the morning of the wedding, ensuring he couldn't transfer any more money before the ceremony. Gianna would arrive during the vows, when maximum attention was guaranteed and retreat was impossible. But the most dangerous part of the plan involved the twins. At barely 3 months old, they were still medically fragile. Bringing them to Napa Valley meant portable heart monitors, backup oxygen supplies, and a pediatric nurse on standby. Any number of complications could arise. "Are you sure about this?" Miranda asked. "The baby's health comes first." Gianna was resolute. Those twins deserved to have their father acknowledge them. They deserved medical support and financial security. If I don't fight for them now, who will? The final element was documentation. Miranda arranged for professional videographers to capture everything under the guise of wedding coverage. Body cameras would record the legal proceedings. Every word, every reaction, every moment of Declan's downfall would be preserved for legal proceedings. Subscribe if you believe in fighting for what's right, because what Gianna was about to do would require more courage than most people possess in a lifetime. 3 weeks before the wedding, everything was in place. Legal documents prepared, medical team briefed, transportation arranged. Gianna had transformed from betrayed wife into strategic warrior, ready to fight not just for herself, but for 2 innocent children whose father had abandoned them. The stage was set for a confrontation that would change lives forever. September 14th dawned perfect in Napa Valley. The Silverado Resort had been transformed into a $1.2 million fairy tale for Declan and Lila's wedding. White roses cascaded from every archway, crystal chandeliers hung from silk-draped trees. A string quartet played Pachelbel's canon as guests in designer gowns and tailored suits took their seats on gold-rimmed chairs. 287 of California's most influential people had gathered to witness what they believed was a love story. Tech executives, real estate moguls, politicians, and Hollywood producers filled the ceremony space. Lila looked radiant in her custom Marchesa gown, while Declan stood at the altar in a bespoke Tom Ford tuxedo, playing the role of devoted groom. The officiant had just asked the gathered guests to speak now or forever hold your peace, when the sound of wheels on gravel broke the valley's silence. A black Mercedes pulled up to the ceremony entrance. The valet rushed forward, then stopped when he saw who emerged. Gianna stepped out wearing an impeccably tailored navy dress and designer heels. But it wasn't her arrival that sent shockwaves through the crowd. It was what she was carrying. A double stroller, medical equipment visible, 2 tiny figures bundled inside. The string quartet's music faltered and died as Gianna began her walk down the rose-petal-strewn aisle. Every head turned, every conversation stopped. The only sounds were her heels clicking against the stone pathway and the soft, rhythmic beeping of heart monitors. Declan's face went white as recognition dawned. Lila's bouquet trembled in her hands. Wedding photographer cameras swung toward this unexpected development, capturing every second of what was about to become the most watched wedding crash in internet history. Gianna reached the altar with measured steps, positioning the stroller where everyone could see its precious cargo. 2 3-month-old boys, still connected to portable medical equipment, their tiny chests rising and falling with each breath. "Good afternoon, everyone." Gianna's voice carried clearly across the silent crowd. "I apologize for interrupting, but there are some people here who needed to meet their father." Bodycam footage from the Napa County Sheriff's deputies who had arrived as backup, captured every detail. The heart monitors beeping in counterpoint to the abandoned string quartet, the guests' shocked expressions, the bride's veil trembling in the breeze. Gianna's speech lasted exactly 43 seconds, every word carefully chosen, legally precise, and devastatingly effective. Under California's community property laws, these twins are entitled to support from their biological father. They've spent their entire lives in medical care, while Declan spent millions on secret properties and lavish celebrations. Today, these babies meet their father officially and legally. She pulled out a manila envelope thick with legal documents. Declan Whitaker, you're being served with paternity papers, child support obligations, and asset freeze orders. The California Superior Court has frozen all Whitaker Resort accounts pending investigation into financial fraud and hidden assets. The crowd sat in stunned silence. Some guests started recording on their phones. Others whispered furiously to companions. A few began quietly gathering their belongings, sensing the social disaster unfolding. Leela broke the silence first, her voice cracking. "This is my wedding day." "These are his children," Gianna replied calmly, adjusting one twin's blanket. "They needed their father to acknowledge them before they could get the medical care they deserve." Declan finally found his voice. "You can't do this here. Not like this." "You had months to do the right thing privately," Gianna responded. "You chose to ignore them, so now we're doing this publicly." Security attempted to intervene, but Miranda's legal team had ensured everything was completely lawful. The sheriff's deputies confirmed the documents were legitimate. There was nothing anyone could do except witness Declan's empire crumbling in real time. As guests began leaving, their phones buzzing with messages and social media notifications, it became clear that this moment would define everyone involved. Within hours, hashtags like Napa Wedding Crash and Twin Justice were trending worldwide. 287 people held their breath that day, but 48 million would watch this unfold online, turning Gianna's fight for justice into a global conversation about accountability, parenthood, and the courage to stand up for what's right. Within 72 hours of the wedding crash, California's Superior Court Judge Eleanor Marquez was reviewing the most comprehensive marital fraud case she'd seen in her 20-year career. The evidence Miranda's team had compiled painted a picture of systematic deception that went far beyond simple adultery. Judge Marquez didn't waste time with preliminary hearings. On September 17th, she issued rulings that would reshape California marital law and sent shockwaves through the business community. First came the asset freeze. $87 million in Whitaker Resort holdings were immediately impounded, pending full investigation. Every bank account, every property, every investment tied to Declan's empire was locked down. The man who had built his fortune on luxury and excess suddenly couldn't access his own money. The court finds evidence of systematic financial deception designed to hide community property from the plaintiff, Judge Marquez stated during the emergency hearing. The scope of this fraud extends beyond matrimonial misconduct into potential criminal territory. The DNA tests that Declan had tried desperately to avoid came back with 99.97% certainty. He was indeed the biological father of both twins. This wasn't just legal confirmation, it was medical necessity. The twins' rare genetic condition required detailed family medical history that only Declan could provide. But the court-ordered paternity results triggered something Declan hadn't anticipated: mandatory health insurance coverage. Under California law, biological fathers must provide medical support for their children. The twins' mounting medical bills, already exceeding $400,000, 0 cents, became Declan's legal responsibility overnight. Judge Marquez's most groundbreaking ruling addressed the hidden assets. Not only did she order full disclosure of all properties and accounts, but she established new precedent for cases involving financial fraud in marriages. The Cabo Villa, The offshore accounts, the shell companies, everything had to be declared and valued for community property division. B. One spouse systematically conceals assets while the other operates in good faith, the judge ruled. The court must ensure the defrauded party receives full compensation for the betrayal of fiduciary duty inherent in marriage. The criminal referrals came next. The Securities and Exchange Commission launched a formal investigation into Whitaker Resorts' financial practices. Federal prosecutors began examining whether Declan's asset concealment constituted wire fraud and tax evasion. What started as a divorce case had evolved into a multi-agency criminal investigation. The legal precedent extended beyond California. Within months, attorneys general in 17 states proposed Whitaker amendments to strengthen financial obligations for children born outside marriage. The case became a rallying cry for reforming laws that had previously allowed wealthy parents to abandon their responsibilities. Harvard Business School added the case to their ethics curriculum, analyzing how personal misconduct can destroy shareholder value and corporate reputation. The Whitaker Resort brand, once synonymous with luxury and discretion, became a cautionary tale about the intersection of personal character and business success. Medical ethics boards published studies using the twins' case to highlight the consequences of concealing parental medical history. Their rare genetic condition could have been identified and treated earlier if Declan had been forthcoming about his family's health background. The financial investigation revealed the true scope of Declan's deception. The $2.8 million Cabo property was just the beginning. Forensic accountants found evidence of systematic fund diversion dating back 5 years. Resort renovation budgets had been inflated to hide personal expenses. Business trips had been elaborate schemes to fund his double life. Judge Marcus's final ruling was devastating. Declan would pay $2.3 million in back child support, cover all medical expenses for the twins, and forfeit his majority stake in Whitaker Resorts. The empire he'd built through deception would be dismantled to pay for the consequences of his choices. But the real transformation was just beginning, because while Declan's world was collapsing under the weight of legal consequences, Gianna was discovering a strength and purpose she never knew she possessed. While Declan's empire crumbled under legal scrutiny, Gianna was building something entirely different. A life dedicated to protecting others from the betrayal she'd endured. The transformation began during those long nights in the NICU, watching the twins fight for every breath. Gianna realized that her experience, as painful as it was, had given her unique insight into how wealthy spouses hide assets and abandon responsibilities. She couldn't be the only woman facing this kind of systematic deception. Within 6 months of the wedding crash, Gianna launched Family First, a non-profit providing legal aid and financial guidance for spouses navigating complex marital fraud. Her first case involved a tech executive's wife who discovered her husband had been hiding cryptocurrency investments worth $12 million. The second was a real estate developer's spouse who found offshore accounts containing their children's college funds. "I lived in a golden cage for years," Gianna told her first group of clients. But cages are still cages, no matter how beautiful they appear. Subscriptions for funding aimed at Stanford Law School invited her to lead corporate accountability seminars, where she taught future attorneys how to identify financial fraud in high-net-worth marriages. Her lectures became so popular that they expanded into a full curriculum, with waiting lists stretching months ahead. The twins' medical journey became central to Gianna's advocacy work. Both boys were diagnosed with a rare genetic condition affecting their respiratory and cardiac systems. The condition, while serious, was manageable with proper care that cost approximately $50,000 per month per child. Their case highlighted a critical gap in healthcare policy. Children born from extramarital affairs often lacked access to crucial paternal medical history, delaying diagnosis and treatment. Gianna testified before congressional subcommittees, advocating for legal reforms that would prioritize children's health needs over parents' privacy concerns. The medical community took notice. Pediatric specialists began referencing the Whitaker Protocol. a framework ensuring children receive comprehensive genetic screening regardless of their parents' relationship status. Major hospitals adopted policies requiring full medical disclosure in cases involving genetic conditions. But it was Gianna's TED Talk that truly captured the world's attention. Titled "The Courage to Rebuild," she appeared on stage with the twins, now healthy toddlers, playing quietly beside her podium. Their tiny wireless health monitors had been replaced with colorful smartwatches that tracked their progress and celebrated their milestones. "These boys taught me that strength isn't measured in bank accounts or business empires," she said, watching them stack blocks with determination. "It's measured in the courage to keep fighting when everything seems impossible." The image of those same babies who had once fought for life in an ICU, now thriving and laughing during their mother's international speaking engagement, became a symbol of resilience that resonated globally. Gianna's non-profit expanded internationally, opening offices in 12 countries. Her book, Financial Infidelity: A Survivor's Guide to Rebuilding, became a bestseller. Universities began offering courses based on her methodologies for identifying and recovering hidden assets. Most importantly, the twins flourished. Their rare condition, while requiring ongoing management, didn't limit their potential. They were curious, energetic boys who had no idea they'd once been symbols of corporate greed and abandonment. To them, they were simply loved children with a mother who fought for justice. From the ashes of betrayal, Gianna had built not just a new life, but a movement that protected others from experiencing her pain. While Gianna was building her movement for justice, Declan Whitaker was experiencing the most spectacular downfall in modern business history. The asset freeze had immediate consequences. Whitaker Resorts, once valued at $450 million, became worthless overnight as investigations revealed the extent of financial manipulation. Properties that had hosted celebrity weddings and political retreats were seized by federal authorities. The flagship Napa Valley location, where Declan had once entertained Silicon Valley elite, became a crime scene for financial investigators. But the most poetic justice came with the court's final decision about the property's future. Judge Marquez ruled that the former Whitaker Resort flagship would be converted into a pediatric rehabilitation center, specifically designed to help children with rare genetic conditions like the twins. The same walls that had witnessed Declan's lavish parties would now echo with the laughter and therapy sessions of children fighting for their health. Declan's attempted comeback was as pathetic as it was predictable. He tried rebranding himself as a business ethics consultant, claiming his experience with corporate challenges made him uniquely qualified to help other executives avoid similar mistakes. The California Bar Association's response was swift. They disbarred his lead attorney for evidence tampering, and no legitimate business would touch Declan's toxic reputation. Corporate speaking engagements dried up. Business partnerships dissolved. Former associates crossed the street to avoid being seen with him. The man who had once commanded respect in boardrooms across the country became a cautionary tale, whispered about in executive circles. Current satellite images tell the complete story of his fall. The Desert Mirage Motel near Death Valley, a rundown establishment with flickering neon signs and cracked parking lots, is where Declan Whitaker now works as a manager. Employees report that he wears a baseball cap pulled low over his eyes, trying to avoid recognition from the occasional traveler who might remember his face from business magazines. From penthouse suites overlooking San Francisco Bay to a roadside motel where truckers stop for cheap coffee and stale donuts, the contrast couldn't be more complete. The man who once flew private jets to secret properties now changes bed sheets and fixes broken air conditioning units for minimum wage. His former business associates occasionally drive past the motel, not out of sympathy, but out of morbid curiosity. They want to see what happens when someone builds an empire on lies and abandons the most vulnerable people in their life. The twins he refused to acknowledge now have college funds established through the sale of his assets. The medical care he denied them is fully funded through court orders. The future he tried to steal from them is more secure than ever. Meanwhile, Declan serves coffee to strangers in the middle of nowhere, a living reminder that actions have consequences, even for those who think money makes them untouchable. 3 years after that September afternoon in Napa Valley, the ripple effects of Gianna's courage continue reshaping how America handles marital fraud, corporate accountability, and children's rights. The legal precedents are staggering. 17 states have now passed Whitaker amendments strengthening financial obligations for children born outside marriage. These laws ensure that wealthy parents can't simply abandon their responsibilities by hiding behind complex financial structures or offshore accounts. Harvard Business School didn't just add this case to their curriculum, they created an entire course called Personal Ethics in Corporate Leadership. Students analyze how Declan's personal choices destroyed shareholder value, damaged brand reputation, and ultimately cost investors hundreds of millions. The case has become required reading for MBA programs across the country. Medical schools now teach the Whitaker Protocol as standard practice. When children present with rare genetic conditions, healthcare providers are legally empowered to compel full parental medical disclosure, regardless of family circumstances. This policy has already saved lives by enabling earlier diagnosis and treatment for dozens of children. The digital age lessons are equally powerful. The Gianna's discovery through cloud storage has become a cautionary tale about how technology preserves evidence of deception. Digital forensics experts reference this case when teaching about metadata, timestamps, and the impossibility of truly erasing financial fraud in our interconnected world. But perhaps the most lasting legacy belongs to the twins themselves. Now healthy, energetic 5-year-olds, they represent the power of fighting for those who cannot fight for themselves. Their rare genetic condition, once life-threatening, is now well managed through the medical care their mother's courage secured. Every year on September 14th, the anniversary of the wedding crash, Gianna receives thousands of messages from people who found the strength to leave abusive relationships, demand financial transparency, or fight for their children's rights. Her story has become a beacon for anyone facing seemingly impossible odds against powerful opponents. The twins often appear with their mother at speaking events, not as symbols of tragedy, but as proof that love, determination, and justice can triumph over wealth and deception. They've grown up knowing that their early fight for life sparked a movement that protects other children. Corporate executives now understand that personal conduct directly impacts professional reputation. Forensic accountants report increased demand for marital asset investigations. Legal aid organizations have expanded services for financial fraud victims. Most importantly, Gianna proved that sometimes the most powerful response to betrayal isn't revenge. It's using your pain to protect others from experiencing the same suffering. What would you have done in Gianna's situation? Would you have had the courage to crash that wedding with those fragile twins? Share your thoughts below, because your story of standing up for what's right might inspire someone else to find their strength. And if this story moved you, subscribe for more incredible tales of ordinary people doing extraordinary things when justice calls.